Welcome to Tramlines, a podcast from Agrii. I'm your host, Tony Smith, putting your questions to the experts. Today we're going to explore Sparsholt Manor Farm's quest for sustainable arable farming. So joining us today are Piers Cowling, Farm Manager at Sparsholt Manor Farms, Agrii's Iain Davy, Seed Product Manager, and Ian Richards, Senior Agronomist and Agronomy Team Leader. So good morning to you all. And Piers, maybe you can start us off by telling us a little bit about this quest that you have been on at Sparsholt Manor Farms.
Well, I came to Sparsholt in 2011. The first area that we realised that was the area of most concern was blackgrass, and this is what Ian and I have spent an awful lot of our time and effort trying to get under control. We started by standardising cultivations. So we had inherited a lot of varying cultivations, and we decided that we standardised it for all the same. So we were always working at the same depth. We took a trip to Stow Longer, which soon convinced us about the benefits of delayed drilling. So we've very much been on a path of that. We're very fortunate that our land is fairly free draining and allows us to do that. But that nevertheless, when we're drilling around about 600 hectares a wheat, and we've been traditionally leaving that until the second half of October, that is quite an interesting strategy.
Thanks, Piers. And Ian, as the agronomist, why has blackgrass been such a key area of focus?
The blackgrass levels are incredibly high. You know, we talk about 100 heads a square metre costing you a tonne a hectare of yield. You know, what in Piers' first harvest, we were seeing levels at 500-600 heads a square metre, and consequently, you know, wheat yields down at somewhere between 5 and 6 tonnes a hectare. So that's where we've come from. But as Piers said, you know, the challenge as we moved to direct drilling was that we couldn't rely on delayed drilling to the extent that we had been, because it's in that direct drill situation where you're not mineralizing any nitrogen, particularly at altitude, and given the aspect and exposure of some of Piers' fields, it was difficult to get competitive crops, you know, but when you're drilling everything in that late window. So, you know, the push on blackgrass control has really been to hopefully reduce the populations to a level at which we're confident to drill certainly some fields that bit earlier.
And so, Piers, what has been your approach when it comes to cultivations? I understand direct drilling has featured, but tell us more.
So, yeah, since 22, we've been predominantly direct drilling. We run a horse avatar. We still use cultivations. We're not evangelical direct drillers. We still use cultivations if we feel we need them, albeit in very shallow. We have for the whole year time we've been doing cover crops, we've put cover crops in with a seeder unit on the back of a cultivator, and we still do that today with a horse cruiser. Only working probably 2 inches depth, but it just feels that that land that's then going to sit over the winter, if it's had a little bit of a cultivation, the water infiltrates it a little bit better, allows us to get going better drilling in the spring, and we direct drill into the cover crops in the spring. But yes, we are predominantly now direct drilling. When we went to the avatar, we went to a 12 metre, which has got the 25 centimetre row spacing, which was another concern that we thought, both from the majority of our crops, we didn't think it was going to be an issue. Spring barley, we thought it may have an impact, but actually that hasn't proven to be so. We haven't seen a yield impact from drilling on the wider rows, and also from the blackgrass perspective, because we thought it's going to allow more light in between the rows, and whether that would actually encourage the blackgrass. But again, that doesn't seem to have been too much of a problem.
And Ian, earlier on you talked about the very high numbers of blackgrass plants in the crop and the effect it was having on the crop, but also Piers has talked about soil health. So what have you seen change on the farm as a result of adopting these cultivation techniques that Piers has talked about?
In the direct drill situation, the one thing the avatar is very good at is seed placement. The depth control across the profile of the drill is incredibly good, which means you get a rapid emergence, and what's more importantly, an even emergence. So our blackgrass control is purely focused around residual chemistry. We've got very high levels of resistance to any contact chemistry. So basically, what we haven't killed pre-Christmas, we're not going to control. So we use a stack of pre-emergence chemistry, but then very importantly, we back that up a peri-emergence. And literally, as soon as we can see the tramlines, we want to go. So ideally, you want the crop just through the ground, but very little blackgrass. And to do that, you need very consistent seed placement. So that's really been the key where we're direct drilling. And as Piers alluded to earlier, where we are cultivating for other reasons, after rape for trash management, cabbage stem flea beetle control, whatever that may be, we're cultivating very shallow, but most importantly of all, we're cultivating at the same depth every time. Because in the past, a top-down, Vardostat top-down was used on the farm, and that was very good at actually sprinkling blackgrass all the way through the soil profile. It would get put in deeper in advance of oilseed rape. So it's taken a long time, because that blackgrass was right the way through the profile. It's taken an awful long time to deplete the seed bank.
Very interesting. And Iain, it sounds to me that you are talking about a very integrated approach that you are taking there to reduce that blackgrass population. Absolutely.
And that's that. We've all talked about an integrated approach to blackgrass control, but never is it more true than it is today. With the spiraling we've seen in resistance to contact chemistry, there is no get out of jail card. So you've got to make conditions absolutely right for those residuals to work, get rapid emergence, so you can back it up with the use of a peri-em.
That's interesting as well. So it's understanding exactly what's going on a field by field basis, I guess.
Yes, and also knowing, at least generally now, we know what we're going to face, because we've been direct drilling for enough years to know that actually the only blackgrass we're going to get in the following crop is from seed return, largely. We're not going to be bringing up blackgrass from previous year's seed return. So we absolutely know our enemy, which enables us to map our blackgrass pre-harvest. We know where the areas are going to be pre-harvest. We know where the areas of seed return are going to be. Well, and we can then plan our autumn establishment campaign accordingly. Hopefully there aren't going to be any surprises, because we go in and cultivate a field deep and pull up blackgrass that we thought would have been non-viable, but actually still was viable 2 or 3 years down the track.
And let's now bring you in, Iain Davy. I know you've been waiting patiently in the wings, so to speak. Why is this farm, why is Piers' approach here working so well? What's different? What can we learn from what's happening here?
Thanks, Tony. I think Piers is very committed to his approach of sustainability. If we take it wider than that, we know that people across the UK have different challenges with soil type and weed challenges. We know that varieties are changing, and over the last year we've seen some radical changes in disease profiles with changes in the weather, some different types of springs. We've seen a massive change in yellow rust disease protection from some of these varieties. We shouldn't forget that the biggest yield penalty in the UK is septoria, but certainly over the last couple of years we've seen some challenges around yellow rust. But blackgrass remains a big issue in many parts of the country.
To find out more on how Agrii can support your farm business, visit agrii.co.uk/sustainable-farming. And Piers, here's a question for you, which I'm sure you'll have an answer to, but is it as simple as just getting 1 or 2 elements performing better on farm?
No, absolutely not. No, it's holistic. So yes, we extended our rotation, including the cover crops. we chop all of our straw, and we don't have any livestock on the farm. We don't have any graziers in. We don't import any muck. But yet we've been organic matter testing regularly. We started organic matter testing in 2018, and our average organic matter at that point was just under 4%. Obviously, we'd been doing a lot of our good stuff before that, but that was, it was not a bad starting point. As of this year, our average organic matter is nearly 7%. The benefits of that obviously then knock on in terms of using less fertilizers. In conjunction with that, relative to testing, our P&K usage is dropping because we're cycling nutrients better. Water retention is obviously better, which in the current hot weather we're having is relevant in terms of, we're holding a green leaf area longer. And our soils are generally healthier, and that allows us to grow healthier crops, which then allows us to start looking at being able to reduce some of our inputs, which is, of course, brilliant environmentally and economically. Our shift to direct drilling from what was a 3-pass cultivations and drilling system has reduced our fuel usage. So on our 3-pass cultivation system, we were averaging using 45 litres a hectare to establish a crop. We now use sub 10 litres a hectare.
I mean, to me, those sound like amazing results. I'm not sure what you're thinking as you listen to this podcast, but Iain, these results, that change is quite staggering, isn't it?
It is, yes. And actually, this year we've gone even further in terms of reducing our manufactured nitrogen inputs, as soil health has improved. Okay, this year, we do have the benefit of some well-rooted, really well-structured canopies, but with some novel approaches to nutrition. We're only applying 2 doses of liquid nitrogen to wheat and to oilseed rape. We use LiquiSafe, which slows down the release of that product. We also buffer that with the incorporation of a molasses product to hopefully negate some of the more harmful effects of applied nitrogen on soil, fungi and bacteria. So this year, for instance, on oilseed rape, we use some novel liquid products in the autumn. First one was called Low No Multi on the 4th of September. That's a foliar amine source of N. Second one we applied on the 18th of September, which is Physio-N, which is a methylated urea with a biostimulant. That's all we used in the autumn. We were then able to create a green area index of 3.5 pre-flowering with only 150 kilos of applied nitrogen. And when you think, many people would be using, well, certainly in excess of 200, very often plus autumn nitrogen, we've probably saved somewhere in the region of 70 kilos of nitrogen. At current prices, that represents a saving of over £100 a hectare. And okay, yes, we got the cost of the foliar products, but that was about £40 a hectare. So, we're actually, when you start to monetize some of these policy changes we've made in the current climate, you look at nutrient use efficiency, nutrient savings, fuel savings, particularly with what's happened, elsewhere in the world in recent weeks and months, that the savings are really significant there.
And those benefits, Iain, are great news. It's amazing. Piers, just to ask you, in terms of selecting the right varieties, does that have an important part to play?
Oh, hugely so. Yeah. So on a couple of levels, our seed selection for a long time has been based on the fact that we're stacking the odds when we're drilling, because we're drilling late on an exposed site. So autumn vigor has always been a huge factor, and then disease resistance scores are our second consideration. We've been actively trying to reduce our fungicide use. The wheels have come off that a little bit this year with the yellow rust situation, but up until this last year, over the last 5 years, we've taken at least 1 crop of wheat all the way through to harvest with no synthetic fungicides. Vigor and disease resistance are the criteria that we're looking for more than out and out yield, because the way that we're running our business is whilst yield obviously helps your bottom line. Maximum yield is a very different thing to maximum economic yield.
Piers, you make such a clear point there about the importance of selecting the right variety. Iain, how can farmers make those decisions even better going forwards?
So the right choices are not always made. Sometimes mistakes make magic, and with the example at Sparsholt Manor Farms, historically Piers was growing a mix of Group 1s and Group 4 hards. But things change. There's been varieties that we've liked, that we've stuck with. There's been varieties that we've tried because on paper, they made sense perhaps. So good disease profile, nice early vigor, and then we get it into a practical situation, 800 feet above sea level, and drilled in the latter half of October, and then a weather window comes in after it, and it doesn't work. So I think we've got to try things, and Piers Sparsholt is very prepared to try things. It's great getting advice from experts, but you've got to absolutely know how it works on your farm, in your system.
Why adopt changes such as what Piers has done on Sparsholt Manor Farms?
I think there are a lot of pressures for the industry at the moment, and change is important to keep ahead of those changes and challenges to remain in business. We can't keep doing the same thing. We've got to look for ways to improve and sustainably improve, lower our cost base. Yeah, it's important to change to be in business for tomorrow.
And Iain, as the agronomist on this farm, what can we all learn from this approach that's been taken on Sparsholt Manor Farms and the results that they are starting to see?
This has been a perfect story of progressive adoption in many ways. We've spent many years getting our soils in the right condition to be able to adopt this approach. At the time, it wasn't done for financial reasons, but actually now it's, as we've heard during this podcast, the savings in fuel, in nutrient use are really starting to rack up. And I would encourage anybody in the current economic climate in farming to look at every cost and look at every operation they do, and try and look at their whole system, because there are different ways of growing crops now.
Yeah. And Piers, a final thoughts from you. We started the podcast with talking about, and they were your words, Sparsholt Manor Farm's quest for sustainable arable farming. Can you see that quest, a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel of that quest, or is there still a lot more work to do? I can see you smiling. I'm looking forward to your answer.
I think the more we learn, the more there is to learn. We're a long way from done yet. I still think we've got mileage on reducing our inputs. And I think our environmental responsibility is something that we're all becoming much more aware of, and we're seeing the benefits of that. We've used no insecticides, and we've got lots of beneficial insects doing a lot of work for us, which is better for the environment, and again it's better for the budget. This is why I said it's sustainable, covers both sides. A lot of what we're doing is risk management actually, and if we've managed to grow our crops by putting less inputs into them, then we're less exposed to having a reduced yield should that happen. So I think it's the right way to go forward. We are nowhere done yet. There's a lot more to come.
Thank you, Piers Cowling from Sparsholt Manor Farms and Agrii's Iain Richards and Iain Davy. Do stay tuned here on Tramlines with over 120 episodes to choose from. If you have any questions for our experts that you'd like answered, email them in to info@agrii.co.uk. That's it for this podcast, but do tune in again as we meet the experts throughout the season, exploring the many immediate and longer term questions for growers and farmers in the UK. See you next time.